First tonight, Munir Mohammed said he'd come to the UK to seek refuge. However, once he'd got here, he hatched a plot which police fear could have killed and maimed Christmas shoppers out and about in Derby. He also researched how to make the deadly poison ricin whilst he was working in a factory making supermarket ready meals. And he was helped in all this by a woman that he'd met through an online dating agency. Jeremy Ball has been investigating.
It was December 2016 when most of us were making our Christmas lists, but one man living here was making preparations that were much more sinister. Inside a besit at number 28, a man was collecting the ingredients for a bomb. Police believe Derby's Christmas shoppers could have been a target.
We were clearly on the sharp end of a very serious plot that presented a very real risk to very many people.
We moved in at the time that we did in order to prevent what we perceived to be an imminent attack.
And that's not all.
Place poison in food like fruit and vegetables in markets, or inject poison in drinks and foods that are prohibited in Islam.
So how close did Derby come to disaster? Munir Mohammed arrived in the UK on the back of a lorry. The Sudanese national applied for asylum and was dispersed to Derby while his case was considered. He later signed up to an online dating agency for single Muslims. His profile said he was working to prepare for the next life. Through the site, he approached Roeda El Hassan from London, who also had links to Sudan. Her profile said, "I want someone who'll be upfront, honest." The police believe Mohammed was interested in her because she could help him make a bomb.
Her training as a pharmacist meant that she had particular knowledge and skills that Munir Mohammed lacked, and those are the skills to be able to understand how to acquire the chemicals that he needed, what sorts of products he needed to buy, and that's exactly the sort of advice that she was giving him.
Advice to build a bomb using the explosive TATP, just like the one detonated to devastating effect in Manchester last year. On the 1st of December 2016, Munir Mohammed went shopping. As he browsed the shelves of Asda in Spondon, he was on the phone to El Hassan, getting advice on what to buy. A week later, he was caught on camera again, this time looking at pressure cookers at Ace Discounts in Normanton, just like those used in the Boston Marathon bombing in America.
Had he started to construct TATP, which he could have done within hours of being arrested, it would have posed a very, very serious risk to cause mass fatalities and mass casualties wherever that might have been.
On the night, it must have been incredibly stressful, I guess.
It was, no two ways about it.
Jim Allen remembers the evening of December the 11th all too well. That was when the man in charge of policing in Derby was handed intelligence that a terrorist attack could be imminent.
You hope as a police officer never to hear that information, hope to never have to act in response to it, because the stakes are as high as they can be. I'll say on that night, I was a worried man. We went from an investigation that was developing to the action phase within about 6 hours.
In the early hours of December the 12th, 80 police officers moved in. Mohammed was arrested here on Leopold Street, El Hassan at her home in London. Inside his wardrobe, officers found one of the chemicals needed to make TATP. Another ingredient was being stored in his fridge.
The potential consequences of the plot that Munir was involved in could have been horrendous. I'm extremely thankful that we were able to get ahead of it and we were able to stop him before he could act. We don't know where his target was, but I can only say that we arrested him within 250 metres of the city centre. We arrested him within a few hundred metres of a large, crowded shopping centre. And we know that terrorists are attracted to crowded places because that's where they cause the most damage and that's where they get the most impact.
Last autumn, the same shopping centre allowed the police and other emergency services to carry out a training exercise for dealing with a terrorist attack. Officers insist the two events aren't connected. At Munir Mohammed's besit, detectives recovered phones and other devices. They showed he'd exchanged violent ISIS videos with El Hassan. At the time of his arrest, Mohammed worked here at Kerry Foods in Burton-on-Trent. He was in the kitchen making ready meals sold by Tesco and Morrison's. At the same time, he was in contact with a man called Abu Bakr Kurdi, thought to be an ISIS commander. Kurdi urged followers to carry out lone wolf attacks using poison.
Place poison in food like fruit and vegetables in markets, or inject poison in drinks and foods that are prohibited in Islam.
On this computer notebook, Mohammed had an ISIS instructional video on how to make deadly ricin.
He had the opportunity to deliver a poison attack as part of his employment. That said, we've seen no evidence that that was the type of plot ultimately that he was going to pursue. But what would have happened next, it's hard to say.
Professor Chris Elliott is an expert on food security.
In terms of poisoning a food supply system, thankfully it's a very, very difficult thing to do because there are so many stages that you have to bypass. Is it a worry? In some ways, yes, but you think about those measures that businesses put in place to make sure that you're not allowed to carry anything onto the factory floor. The food businesses right across the UK and further afield will look at this and they will have to say, are the measures that we have in place currently robust enough? And if not, they will have to strengthen them.
Munir Mohammed had got the kitchen job through a recruitment agency using a fake Dutch ID card and driving licence. That agency, the GI Group, says, "We cooperated fully with the authorities and also commissioned an independent review which concluded that our candidate vetting procedures are rigorous and exceed Home Office guidelines." Kerry Foods says it treats food safety with paramount importance and it takes every possible measure to ensure the safety and integrity of products manufactured at our facilities. It's not the first time Derby's hit the headlines because of terrorism. Previous incidents have seen homegrown jihadis travel or attempt to travel to the Middle East to carry out Islamist-inspired attacks. Derbyshire's Chief Constable used to be head of counter-terrorism for the East Midlands. He's worried about another potential threat. Fighters for the so-called Islamic State, who may now be returning to the UK from Syria and Iraq.
If you've learnt how to use firearms, how to use explosives, what it's like to be in a war zone, and you bring all of those experiences back to the UK, back to Derby, back to Derbyshire, then you are a significantly more dangerous person than you were when you went out. I can't talk to you generally about how many people have gone or how many people have returned to Derby, but we are very conscious that somebody who's been out there and who's been through that are probably going to be quite dangerous individuals that we need to keep a close eye on.
Mohammed and El Hassan had denied being behind any terrorist plot to use explosives or poison, but last week, after a trial at the Old Bailey in London, they were both convicted. They're due to be sentenced next month.
If they hadn't been foiled, the consequences could have been catastrophic, and the police and security services are far from complacent about the threat from terrorism, but they say stopping attacks in the future is down to all of us.